Hello, good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. In the Hot Seat today we have got a person who's described as a serial investor on the Colombo Stock Exchange and a person who has spent a long time calling for greater accountability, transparency to ensure that it is a solid mechanism in place. To share some thoughts tonight is Mr. K.C. Vignaraja, serial investor. Good evening. Thank you for being on the Hot Seat, sir, Mr. Vignaraja.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Mr. Vignaraja, people say, some corporates say, that you are a real pain. And how do you respond to that?
Well, many good corporates are very happy with the work that I am doing because it cleans up or tries to clean up the image of the corporate sector, and a few of the mafia oriented corporates are spreading a lot of stories about me which are false, and at the same time it does not matter to me. And the fundamental importance is that the work that I do is to improve the image of the stock market, the country, and the enterprise sector. And the enterprise sector is absolutely important for our country at this particular moment of time. Of course, it has been so important for a long time, but at this particular moment, there should be a paradigm shift to good corporate governance, transparency, and accountability. And
Mr. Vignaraja, we had a situation soon after just as the war was coming to an end. The index, the market index was, the all-share index was, I think, around 1,500. Soon after the war ended, it surged dramatically. I think to around 7,800. Just under 8,000?
From about 6,000, I think it went up to 7,000, 5,000 to 7,000.
So, and now we have a situation, in between we had all sorts of other jolly games, which we will discuss in a minute, like pumping and dumping and so on, market manipulation and lots of restrictions and handbrakes and whatever. But today we have the share market hovering in and out of the 6,000 mark. Have we found the right level now? Is that the right
not
level?
really. Not really. Because after the end of the war, there were tremendous opportunities. And it was natural that it should go up to a certain level. But the problem was that many people took advantage, unfair advantage of some insider knowledge, as well as you referred to pump and dump. You see pump and dump, malpractices, manipulating all sorts of stock movements, and exchange rate and interest rate movements. They are interlinked. They are inextricably interlinked. And so there were a lot of connivance between a group of investors, the mafia we call them, and some sections of the government and authorities. So that was one of the reasons. In fact, I predicted at one stage that it should go to, in a seminar where the SEC, CSE and the investors were there, that if they bring about good governance, transparency and accountability, that it would hit to 7,500 at a point. It exactly did that. When I predicted that when it was about 6,000 on.
Right.
And then I said it will hit 10,000 mark over this thing, but I said rigid governance rules and enforcement of them by the SEC must be there, but CSC was the intermediary, so CSC played a big part, and then played a big part or no part. You see, this is the problem. In some areas they helped their wrongdoers, and in the others they just kept quiet when they had to punish the wrongdoers. And the SEC took a back seat. But there was two chairpersons, Mrs. Indrani Sugadasa and Mr. Tilak Karnaratna. they were actually eased out or forced out.
Yeah.
And at that time I objected that I wrote to the President, I wrote to the Secretary, and it was published in all the papers. But somehow the forces that were against good governance, dark forces that were the hidden forces that were inimical to this, they won. And so again there was this pump and dump and things like that. Now, so we all wanted a change in government at that time, merely because the President at that time was misled by a group of people who were
had their own agenda.
Yes.
Now,
and after that we hoped that it would change, but the change is far too slow, and I wonder whether the people who should act are able to act.
Right.
That's all.
Obviously, in the last 9 years, or well, 10 years now, but in the time of the Rajapaksa administration, they said that there was a real fear psychosis. And so in that context, how easy or difficult was it for public officials to remain independent and not fall prey to political pressures? We have a case of the former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission, who's in some trouble. He's been charged over some matter involving the granting of 5 million rupees to a political organization headed by the former president, President's son, Nama Rajapaksa. Now, what do you think would have happened to him as chairman of the SEC if he didn't play ball with young Nama and young Nama's request? What would have happened?
I think, I'm not much into politics.
No, okay.
But at the same time, I would say that fear psychosis was there. There's no doubt about it. And officials also were reluctant to do their jobs. That's one of the factors. But the saving grace is that there were some officials at least who would decline and not comply.
Right.
But they would move away. So that is where matters of principles. And that was very important. And the ultimate result was that the people also felt that they should be moved out. This type of authoritarians should be moved out and replaced.
On that note, we'll take a short break. Do stay tuned to the Hot Seat. We'll be right back. Good evening and welcome back to the Hot Seat, where we're joined by a serial investor, Mr. K.C. Vignaraja. Mr. Vignaraja, again, thank you for being on our program, and I do know that you're not politically inclined, but I was just merely asking for you to have your independent view as to what would have happened to officials who didn't toe the line, so to speak. But having said that, why does the stock rise so rapidly, ordinarily? Why would it rise? As an investor, you should know that. Why would the stock rise? Under which circumstances would it rise?
It could rise on fundamentals, on expectations of good growth, on macroeconomic fundamentals. As I said, if your rupee is competitive and the interest rates are low, and all other factors which are good for exports, good for manufacturing, added value, services, tourism, all these factors. If those policies implemented by the authorities who are in charge of the economy, central bank, treasury, enterprise development, whatever, then, and if people believe that the corporates are behaving correctly, then of course those stocks would rise. But in the context of what has been happening is that the mafia had control of most of these functions, and they've had inside information as well. So if they would expect certain fluctuations in the currency or in interest rates, they would, move massive funds into them, and many of them had investments in investment companies, unit trusts, debenture markets, bond markets, bills, everything. They were into everything.
Right.
So that they could push and pull wherever they want.
So it was an artificial, the shares were propped up artificially.
Yes.
It wasn't really that the share of company XYZ was worth more. We had the instance where a firm of stockbrokers, I think, their share price was higher than that of a bank. And, it seemed odd at the time. But nevertheless, that's what happens. But it's not, is it fundamentally wrong, circular trading, for example, a group of people trading amongst themselves in a kind of a circle? Is it wrong?
It's not only wrong, it's illegal, it's a crime by decent society.
Right.
Because I try to represent the average decent citizen.
Right.
The average decent citizen has a right to invest and see that his funds are protected, that there is sufficient growth to meet the inflation. Now these are the expectations of a normal good investor.
Right.
Now the stock market has been trying to attract even rural investors, and I said, are you giving them the sufficient protection? Are you taking them for a ride, or are you letting people take them for a ride? I have asked the regulators this, and when they asked me, some of them asked me that I should follow this procedure and this one, I said, look, I can, but I'm also trying to see that what would be the position of the average man. Maybe the Govia from Vintana.
Yeah.
You are trying to get his funds. So all the stockbrokers have at one stage went out and told them to invest.
Yes, they went into the rural areas.
Rural areas. What was the protection that we offered? They said you should have applied for these within such and such a time. I said, did you make all these things known to them? Then they said you can get them to invest in the unit trust. Now the unit trusts again have been manipulated by a set group of people. If you look at them, they are into investments, companies, and not one, 2, 3 companies. And they have links with every aspect of it. And then the manipulation was easy. In fact, they had even nominees in their banks, different banks.
Yes.
So there are honorable people, but at the same time, sometimes they keep quiet.
Right.
Now that is the problem, and
so sometimes you can actually do great damage by doing nothing.
Exactly. You see, because people trust you. He's on that board. They are fighting. They are supposed to be independent directors, but the independent directors have been appointed by the controlling interests or the mafia.
But isn't it rather shameful when corporates, especially listed corporates, hire reputations, in short, by hiring people whose reputations are perceived to be whiter than white? They hire them to be on their boards to lend credibility. Isn't that, how ethical is that?
It's totally unethical, and not only that, they expect them to be mere rubber stamps. But as I said, there are good corporates. They themselves declare good dividends. A good dividend payout. Maintaining a good public float. That's absolutely important for the marketability. If you have shares in the market, it must be marketable. It must be transparent.
Are there rules in place to ensure that X amount or X percentage of shares in any company must be in the float or in the market?
I have been fighting for from a long time that a minimum public float of 30% should be there to ensure marketability.
What's the amount now?
Well, they manipulated it to bring it down to 20%.
Right.
And there's talk of increasing it to 25%.
Right.
But even with the 20%, They have provided a lot of loopholes and escape routes.
Right.
Now this was public policy announced after a lot of discussions in 2010.
Right.
We brought out all this, and then at that time itself they created after some protest by others, they created a loophole,
right,
saying within such and such a period you can delist.
Right.
Now delist again is depriving a market for the independent shareholders.
Right.
Now, and delisting profitable companies. We have tremendous potential. So if the controlling interests do understand, because they are in charge of all the information,
yeah,
which the shareholders don't have, and they see the potential, they have all the studies,
yeah,
and then they corner these shares, and then they say we will delist. Now that's a worst crime. It's a white collar crime of the highest magnitude.
yes,
In fact, I have termed it earlier somewhere when one regime fought the so-called armed terrorism.
yeah,
The economic terrorism of these guys who were with the regimes were far greater. They did far greater damage.
So
Like taking all the borrowed funds, siphon them abroad.
so
Different mechanisms.
So would it be fair to call those people traitors?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no better. You know, it's mentioned that patriotism sometimes, within inverted commas, is the ultimate resort of the scoundrel, right? But the traitors, in its real sense, they are absolute traitors to the country, to the image, and to the decent people. The lifestyle and the standards of the decent people in our country should have been much higher. We should have been much better than Singapore, if not for these. What is the difference in Singapore? Singapore, the Prime Minister had 3 short versions. Zero corruption.
Yeah.
Meritocracy, which means no discrimination whatsoever. The other one was pragmatism. What does it matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mice?
Right.
Simple fundamentals of good governance. That is jettisoned by all these people bringing out various jargons and slogans. Now say for instance derivatives, they want to enter into various products, the CSC. It only dazzles the other people, and the poor masses are misled. Warren Buffett once called derivatives as WMD, weapons of mass destruction. You see, absolutely. And these fellows, go out, I'm bringing this product, that product. Do the existing products well, then you will find it that the market will take off on its own.
On that note, we'll take another short break and we'll be right back. Good evening again and welcome back to the Hot Seat, where we're joined by serial investor Mr. K.C. Vignaraja. Mr. Vignaraja, what is the lot of the minority shareholder these days? Are there enough rules protecting them? What's happening?
There is no one protecting them, unfortunately. There should be regulators doing that, but there has been some movement recently, and I had written to the chairman, Mr. Tilak Karnaratne, and I think he has responded, because at one stage they were saying that this is all left to the majority decisions, etc. Then I argued and said that then what's the protection? Actually, there was a seminar once where the Institute of Chartered Accountants, the CFA, and the CSE, Colombo Stock Exchange had, and virtually they had a 12-page document, a glossy cover, and ultimately they said that what was in was erroneous, because I pointed out, and I was really given little time, because from the audience it was difficult. They didn't have anyone on the panel who would truly represent the independent minority shareholders.
Right.
And ultimately the conclusion was, well, you have the right to go to court.
Right.
Now can you expect the small investor, the shareholders, to go to courts? Now the SEC has quasi-judicial powers, and if you are having an inquiry, at least you must have the complainant, like in a police station, the complainant and the accused or the victim or whatever, face to face. They have never done that, because they listen to that story, and of course now they have started, at least in my case I made a few complaints and they wrote, and it was good that they did. I was able to rebut some of them, and of course at one stage someone wrote to them that my remarks were defamatory. So so I wrote back saying the lawyer had written, the accused really should have also responded at that time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I said, what did I defame? The defaming the fame that they have of shrinking the public float, of not declaring dividends, of creating shareholder fatigue, of attempting to delist very good companies at low valuations.
Yeah.
Now these, they have the easy resort, because they use the resources of the company, of the shareholders, to litigate.
Now, Mr. Vikraj, let me ask you about this. Obviously, the capital market is an essential tool in the progress and the forward march of the economy in the country. But we also have situations where people have gone for public listings and they have raised money, and the matter's ended there. They've got the money, but instead of developing or on their promises, on their assurances, on the basis upon which they raise this money from the public, they've done nothing. What laws are in place to prevent that? I mean, if they haven't built whatever it is, a resort, a factory, whatever, then don't you think that they ought to, in my mind, in a very simplistic approach would be that they ought to return that money, or at the least pay them the market rate of interest on that money. But nothing of the sorts happened. How easy is it, and why does it exist?
I'm happy that you raised it, and the knowledge that you have. I'm amazed that many people in authority who should have this attitude, they don't have it. And the alternative that you gave, I disagree, that give back the money with market interest rate. Many people would be happy to do it, because the potential of the project is so enormous that paying them interest rate would be defeating the purpose of the original investment. The investor takes a risk to get much better than market rates of interest.
Of course,
on the inflation, the appreciation. In fact, there was a world-renowned authority on valuation of shares and properties on transfers, that usually it is worth 4 to 5 times the values that many of these transactions have taken place. It was a Harvard review as well some years back, and Dr. Mervyn King was here addressing a seminar.
4 to 5 times what? The value, the market cap?
No, the value at which these transfers had taken place.
Oh, I see.
You see, transfers or the offers. Now in one case, a company, public listed company, circulated an offer after consideration by the board, etc., by an independent, so-called independent regime, but obviously an associate, at some 40 or 40 odd rupees. Now I looked at it, I waited for all these things to happen, and when they were probably about to accept, I made an offer of more than double the price, at 83 rupees. Right? Then they quickly had other offers of 91, 95.
Okay.
And then they said, no, we are not now thinking of this transaction. Now what did it mean? If it was at 95, then if they didn't sell, at least if they didn't want to take my offer, then they should have given it at 95. Then the prices had dropped back to some 30, etc.
Okay.
And now again it had been pushed up a little because I was raising all these issues.
Yeah.
Now, you rightly said that if it was taken from the shareholders,
Yeah.
you must keep them continually advised as to what is happening.
Of course.
That is transparency.
Yeah.
And you can't deviate without going back to the shareholders and getting permission. Now, shareholder approval again is a joke, because if you have just a majority, you do what you want, and if you have 75%, you even change the articles.
Yeah.
Now, that is where it is significant that you must have a provision. There are certain provisions, but you have to go to courts, and it means years and lots of money. By that time, it has defeated the purpose.
That's right, but you see, small-time investors, retail investors, if you like, it's beyond them to delve into all these minute details that you are speaking of now. And so I suppose, what do you think the possibility is of these investors actually remaining as long-term investors or long-term players in the market, all very essential to raise capital? So what happens to their confidence? And
yes, this is the same issue that has been now brought into focus as to why the market is not performing. In one word, it's lack of investor confidence. Investor confidence that proper things can be done. Now the remedy is very simple. Instead of saying let the controlling interests choose people of integrity and put them as independent directors, that is rubbish. They become only mercenaries.
Yeah.
Or they are quite happy to be towing the line or being a rubber stamp. Now what you should do is the real stakeholders, the independent minority shareholders, should elect the independent directors. And if you have a 10% stake, you are a sufficiently interested person, you should be, or maybe 2 or 3 shareholders getting together, should be able to nominate a director for each 10% holding on the board. Then you have people who are interested in the success of the company and who want to see that it progresses. There is no doubt that the majority of should run the company. There is no doubt at all, and I agree with that, and I support it because they have a great stake.
Yeah.
But the transparency and accountability is ensured only by really independent representatives or the minority shareholders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ignaraja, for your comments. It's been a great pleasure having you on the program, and we hope to welcome you again on our network again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.